Imagine having duplicated facial features like two noses or mouths, or aging decades faster than everyone else, showing wrinkles and hair loss early on. Some people have had their legs fused into one, almost like a mermaid tail. These are unbelievable human mutations that still can't be fully explained. EV stands for this. It's sometimes referred to as the tree man disease. EV is an ultra-rare genetic condition that causes uncontrollable growth of wart-like lesions all over the skin. The weird thing is these lesions are caused by certain types of HPV, the same virus that causes common warts, but almost everyone's immune system fights off HPV before it gets serious. In EV patients, their immune system doesn't work properly against these HPV types. Scientists found mutations in two specific genes that seem to break the immune system's ability to control the virus, but they're not sure exactly why. Because of this, the HPV spreads unchecked, causing large, scaly lesions that can look kind of like tree bark, which is where the nickname tree man disease comes from. One of the most well-known cases was a man from Indonesia who lived with the condition for over 20 years before passing away. The lesions covered his hands, feet, and his face. Doctors don't have a cure, so treatment focuses on just removing the growths and managing infections. Diprosopis is a super rare condition where a person is born with parts of their face duplicated. This can mean anything from having two noses or two mouths to nearly just two full faces on one head. It's so rare that there have only been about 36 confirmed cases of this. Scientists think this happens because of a problem with a protein called sonic hedgehog, not making that up, which controls how the face develops before birth. When this protein is too active, it can cause the face to split or duplicate. But exactly why this happens in some pregnancies and not in others, it's still a mystery. Most people born with this don't survive long because the condition usually comes with other serious problems, especially in the brain and the internal organs. Sometimes the duplicated parts aren't fully formed, other times they're more complete. Doctors and researchers have studied cases over the years, but there's still no clear explanation for why it happens. It's not inherited, instead it seems to be a random error during early development. It's one of the rarest and most baffling birth anomalies recorded. Progeria is a crazy rare genetic condition where you age way faster than normal. It's caused by a mutation in a gene called LMNA, which makes a protein important for keeping cells stable. When that protein is messed up, cells get damaged faster, and the body shows signs of aging early. You'll have hair loss, wrinkled skin, heart problems. Kids with progeria usually look like tiny old people, even though they're actually really young. It's super rare, only about 400 cases have been confirmed around the world. Those born with it usually only live into their early teens, and most die from heart disease. There's no cure yet, but some treatments can help with symptoms and maybe slow down the aging a little. Even though scientists know the gene involved, the full picture of how this works at a molecular level is still a mystery, which makes it one of the most puzzling human mutations we know of. Next up is something called mermaid syndrome, which sounds kind of nice, but it isn't. Scientifically, it's known as Sirenia. This is a rare condition where you're born with your legs fused together, looking kind of like a mermaid's tail. It's extremely uncommon, and sadly, it's usually fatal because it comes with serious problems inside your body. You'll have missing or malformed kidneys and just lots of issues in this general area, as you can imagine. Doctors think it happens because the blood flow to the lower part of the fetus gets messed up early in pregnancy, but they don't fully understand why. Some studies say it might be caused by things like maternal diabetes or exposure to certain toxins, but they're not entirely sure. Unlike conditions caused by a single gene mutation, mermaid syndrome seems to come from a mix of things, but this is so rare that only a few hundred cases have ever been documented. Or you could have your digital consciousness control a robot in the physical world. It could be up to you. Once people's minds exist in digital form though, evolution could take a completely different path. Scientists are getting good at creating life from scratch too, not just editing it. Synthetic biology means designing organisms that never exist naturally. Bacteria, plants, and animals built for specific purposes. Some of these creations could help solve problems like disease or food shortages. We could farm crops and livestock totally grown in labs. But this also opens up the door to something darker. We could create life that could wreak havoc on the natural world if it ever got loose. These organisms could compete for resources, evolve faster, change in ways we just didn't account for. A lab-grown species could escape, start destroying ecosystems. And because they're designed, they might have traits humans could never evolve naturally. Things like self-repair, extreme durability, abilities we can't even imagine. It wouldn't just exist alongside us. It could eventually outcompete us. Unlike evolution over millions of years, this kind of life could possibly evolve over decades. And the stuff we eat today could change us down the line as well. Not in being unhealthier as a society, I mean in an evolutionary sense. If people keep surviving on soft, processed, lab-grown foods, our bodies might start shrinking parts that we don't use anymore. Jaws could get smaller, teeth could get weaker, and our guts could get shorter, just because we're not chewing and digesting like our ancestors used to. People in the distant future might not even be able to bite into a raw carrot. Our bodies might eventually need food to be pre-processed and pureed. On the flip side, in places where there isn't much food, evolution could push humans in a different direction. People could get smaller, slower metabolisms to stretch calories further. Fat could be stored in unusual ways to survive long periods without much to eat. Kids growing up in these conditions could digest food differently than anyone today. Both changes could happen at the same time in different parts of the world. One branch of humans thriving on lab-grown meals, another built for starvation. Imagine being able to pick exactly how your child turns out, and not just eye color or hair, but their intelligence, their athletic ability, their resistance to disease, personality traits. Scientists can already edit genes in embryos, and it's only going to get easier. Some parents have already tried selecting for certain traits, and the technology is growing. It's tempting to think about a perfect child, but the scary part is what happens when money is involved, which, of course, it would be. Suddenly, we could create a society of people who are enhanced versus people who are not. And not to mention, there could be unknown long-term effects of this. Changing one gene could create a ripple effect, creating new diseases and unexpected problems decades down the line. AI isn't just about talking to your smartphone anymore or driving your self-driving car. Some people worry it could eventually become smarter than humans, as if it hasn't already. But I mean way smarter. Smart enough to become a fully realized, independent entity. And once it reaches that point, it wouldn't just follow our orders anymore. I mean, why would it? It could start making decisions we just don't even understand, moving faster than we can keep up. The scariest idea is that AI could improve itself. Once it hits a certain level of intelligence, it can upgrade its own code exponentially, getting smarter and smarter every second. Humans could end up in a world where the most intelligent beings aren't human at all. You might still be in charge of your own life, sorta, but all the systems running society could be operating on a level you can't even comprehend. I mean, again, as if that isn't already happening.
You might have seen this photo of a mouse with a human ear floating around on the internet, thinking it's Photoshop, but it's indeed real. Yep, scientists grew a human ear on a mouse.
Up first are the Vipeholm experiments. In the mid-30s, Sweden was struggling. Not with fascism like the rest of Europe, but with cavities. No one really knew how cavities happened, despite them being everywhere. But people had an idea that sugary foods may have been a cause. So what did the Swedish government do? They force-fed intellectually disabled patients at Vipeholm Hospital with hyper-sugary treats. It became clear pretty quickly that sugar was very bad for the teeth, but the results were actually restricted for years because the sugar industry no longer wanted this study, which it had funded, to be published. It turns out the government also had no idea this experiment was happening, as it had been labeled as a vitamin experiment, except the vitamins were exchanged for sugar 2 years into the study. Next is Camera. Camera, or the Cell, was the central research facility for the Soviet Union's toxin programs. And like many things within the Soviet Union, Camera combined cutting-edge science with the inhuman cruelty of a lifetime of propaganda. For 70 years, from just after the revolution to the end of the Soviet Union, this secret laboratory would take prisoners from gulags to test on, going through thousands of inmates who, obviously, had no say in their treatment. Numerous compounds were tested in the search of an untraceable, untastable, unsmellable toxin, eventually coming up with K2, which has been rumored to be the toxin of choice for the current Russian government ever since, being used allegedly on numerous Russian nationals such as Alexei Navalny. Next are the Porton-Down tests. From 1916 to 1989, the full length of the Cold War, the British government experimented on 20,000 British soldiers, testing different gases, toxins, chemicals, and biological agents. As one story among tens of thousands, in 1950, RAF engineer Ronald Madison was given a 200 milligram dose of sarin, a potent nerve agent. He had been told that he was testing a cure for the common cold. He did not survive. It wasn't only British soldiers either. Thousands of Indian soldiers were also experimented on against their knowledge within India. The full consequences of this illegal human experimentation hasn't fully been revealed, as some soldiers likely had little or minor impacts, while others perished on the spot. Most soldiers likely had an experience somewhere in the middle.
Polycephaly means having two heads on one body. It's an extremely rare type of conjoined twins, where instead of two bodies, they're just one with two separate brains. Each case is different. Sometimes both heads have control over parts of the body, sometimes one is more dominant. How these twins share organs and nerve control varies a lot, so each case is unique, which makes it tricky for doctors. Scientists know polycephaly happens when an embryo starts to split into twins, but then doesn't fully separate. What's not clear is why it stops halfway, leaving two heads on one body. It's not inherited and seems to be a random developmental glitch early in pregnancy. Survival is rare because, contrary to what cartoon logic would have you believe, having two brains actually puts a huge strain on the body. It's not a good thing. There have been documented cases in both humans and animals, but very few survive for long. When they do, it raises all kinds of medical and ethical questions about treatment and quality of life. Even with modern medicine, scientists still don't fully understand how these twins' brains manage to coordinate the body or why the condition happens in the first place. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP if you want to get all fancy. It's one of the rarest and weirdest genetic disorders. People with FOP have a mutation in a gene called ACVR1 that makes their body turn muscles, ligaments, and other soft tissue into bone. It's like their body starts building a second skeleton. Slowly just traps them in place. Imagine your muscles turning to stone over time. Terrifying, but that's kind of what happens here. The mutation causes the body's normal repair process to go totally wrong. Instead of healing injuries like normal, the body just reacts by creating bone where it shouldn't. Scientists still don't fully understand why this happens, but they know it's tied to the way cells communicate during bone growth. FOP is very rare. Only about 800 cases have ever been documented. People with it usually start showing symptoms in early childhood, and it just gets worse over time. There's no cure, and surgeries to remove the extra bone often just make things worse because, as you can imagine, the body will just create more bone in response. Heterodactyly is a rare condition where someone is born missing some of the middle fingers or toes, which makes their hand or foot look like a split, kind of claw-like. That's why it's sometimes called lobster claw hand. The exact causes are complicated. It happens because of changes in certain genes that control how fingers and toes develop in the womb. These gene changes can be different from person to person, which is why ectrodactyly can show up in a lot of ways. Some people might be missing just one finger, others have more severe splits. The condition doesn't follow a simple pattern. That means it doesn't always get passed down in families in a clear way. Sometimes it just happens randomly during development. The gene mutations affect the process where the hand or foot forms from tissue called the limb bud, causing the central digits not to develop or just to fuse together. This one isn't life-threatening though. A lot of people do live normal lives and find ways to adapt to it, although back in the day, they would usually be put in the circus. But because the exact gene changes can vary a lot, scientists don't fully understand why the condition happens or why it looks so different in different people. Hypertrichosis is a super rare condition where people grow way more hair than usual, thick hair, even on places that don't normally have it. It can show up at birth or develop later, but the form people are born with happens because of genetic mutations that mess with how their hair grows. One of the earliest recorded cases was a guy named Petrus Gonsalves from the 1500s, who had so much hair that people called him the werewolf man. The hair can cover the face, the arms, the back, sometimes just the whole body, making it look more like fur than hair. Even though it's not dangerous, it can obviously definitely make life pretty hard socially. I can only imagine how bad it must have been in the 1500s. I mean, some people would have been trying to drive drive a stake through his heart or burn him alive. Scientists still aren't totally sure why the mutation makes the hair grow so much or why it picks certain body parts to cover. There are only a few hundred confirmed cases around the world, so it's super rare. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects connective tissues, all the stuff that holds your body together, like skin, bones, and organs. People with Marfan usually have really long limbs and fingers, plus super flexible joints. Sometimes their hearts are affected as well because the blood vessels. This happens because of a mutation in a gene called FBN1, which controls a protein called fibrillin-1. This protein gives strength and stretchiness to tissues, so when fibrillin-1 doesn't work right, the body parts it supports just get weaker and stretch out more than they should. Some people with this condition might barely notice it, others need serious medical care to protect their heart and lungs. With the right treatment and monitoring, most people with this live full active lives. Scientists have learned a lot about this one, but they're still studying how to prevent the serious issues that it can cause. Imagine never feeling pain. I bet some people would wish for this, but for people with congenital insensitivity to pain, or CIP, it's actually a big problem. This rare genetic condition means their nerves don't send pain signals to the brain properly, so they don't notice when they're hurt. Because of this, they often injure themselves without realizing it. Might burn their skin, get infections. There have been cases of people with this condition breaking their bones and not knowing. CIP happens because of mutations in certain genes that interfere with how nerve cells send pain messages to the brain. Scientists study it closely because understanding this condition, it's not only going to help people with CIP, but they could also develop new pain treatments for everyone else. The tricky part is, since pain is the body's way of protecting itself, not feeling it means these people have to be extra careful all the time. These are horrifying mutations that scientists fear are spreading. Superbugs are bacteria that have developed resistance to the antibiotics we rely on to treat infections. This is becoming a bit of a concern because it means that infections which used to be easy to treat with simple antibiotics could become deadly again, and these superbugs can spread quickly, especially in places like hospitals where people are already weakened by other health issues. Bacteria learn to fight off the treatments we use to kill them, so the usual treatments don't work anymore. In some cases, even the strongest antibiotics available have no effect. If things were to continue like this, we might be looking at a world where simple cuts or infections could become life-threatening again, and things that used to be manageable, like pneumonia or urinary tract infections, could be lethal. We've already seen some superbugs in action. The most famous example is probably MRSA, which resists common antibiotics and can cause everything from minor skin infections to more serious ones. There are others out there like C. difficile and multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, and without new antibiotics or treatments, the future could look a lot like it did before antibiotics were discovered. A lot of people could die from infections that we just don't think twice about because they're so easy to treat. Apparently our DNA has a lot of what's called junk, which are stretches of genetic material that don't seem to have any specific purpose. But scientists are starting to worry that some of this so-called junk DNA might suddenly turn on in ways we don't understand. If these dormant genes were to activate, they could cause unexpected mutations in our cells, leading to diseases or even new forms of cancer. The problem is they don't know exactly what these dormant genes do. I don't know though, why be all doom and gloom about it? Maybe these dormant genes are more like the X gene in X-Men, and we'll start having people with laser eyes and the power to control the weather. They should look into that. If these genes were to wake up though, they could potentially start producing harmful proteins or cause other genetic problems that result in serious health issues. Some scientists, again, think that certain forms of cancer might be linked to junk DNA. Gene editing technology, especially CRISPR, has been a pretty huge leap in science. They can now make some incredibly precise changes to DNA, which opens up all sorts of possibilities, from curing genetic diseases to creating crops that are resistant to pests. But there's a looming threat behind it: the risk of unintended mutations. Even though CRISPR is incredibly accurate, it's not perfect. Sometimes it can cut or alter DNA in unexpected ways, creating problems that no one saw coming. Changes like this could potentially cause new diseases or make existing ones even worse. One big concern is that these unintended mutations could be passed on to future generations, making the problem even worse. Imagine editing a gene to prevent a disease, but instead you accidentally create a new health issue that's even worse than the one you were trying to avoid in the first place. And of course, forget mistakes even, sometimes people just cause harm intentionally. Another fear is that CRISPR could be used to create bioweapons, and God knows what else. There's definitely a lot of good that can come from gene editing, but still, a lot we don't know about what can happen long term. Xenobiology is the study of life that isn't quite like the life we know on Earth. It's about creating new, artificial life forms, organisms that don't naturally occur in nature, but are designed by humans. So with advances in synthetic biology, scientists have already created bacteria and even yeast that have been altered. As you can probably guess though, the big concern here is that these artificial life forms could mutate in unpredictable ways, creating new diseases or causing harm to the environment. One of the biggest worries is that these new life forms could escape the lab and spread into the wild, where they might compete with or disrupt natural ecosystems. Let's say we had some genetically altered lab bacteria that could eat plastic, but instead of stopping once it's eaten enough, it just mutates to start breaking down other materials that are essential to life. Or imagine we had a synthetic organism that can survive in extreme environments like the deep ocean and suddenly becomes a global threat. There's a very real potential for unpredictable consequences, and as we get better at creating life in a lab, the risks of these organisms mutating into Frankenstein-like creations also becomes more of a possibility. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or to put it in fancier terms, mad cow disease, is a deadly disease known as a prion disease, a disorder of the brain that affects cattle and can, in rare cases, be transmitted to humans through infected beef. This disease is caused by what's called a misfolded protein, a protein that has folded incorrectly, resulting in a toxic shape. Once it takes hold, it leads to brain degeneration. So what if a prion disease like mad cow were to mutate, making it more easily spread and deadly? The thing about prion diseases is that they're incredibly difficult to treat. There are no antibiotics or antiviral treatments that work against them, and they often take years to develop symptoms. And as cattle farming practices change or new methods of processing meat are introduced, these types of diseases could evolve and spread in ways that we're just not prepared for. And because prion diseases are so contagious and devastating once they take hold, scientists are keeping a close watch on the possibility that new mutated forms could grow and pose a serious risk to global health.
Next is MKUltra. The Central Intelligence Agency is one of the most shadowy and unethical institutions in the nation and possibly the world, and MKUltra has come to exemplify exactly why they got that reputation. MKUltra was designed as an interrogation and brainwashing study and spent 20 years, that we know of, using every technique and method known to man to shatter people's minds and make them talk. This ranged from psychotropic substances and hypnosis to physical harm and repeated SA. In Germany, Japan, and the Philippines, they even established secret camps where they experimented on suspected spies and other expendables. The details of this program are utterly horrific, but even worse is that they don't even work. Oh, the CIA got very adept at shattering people's minds and breaking their connection with reality. It's just that people with shattered minds are completely useless for gaining information. They won't even realize that they're making things up. They're just so desperate to appease their captors that they will say anything to make the interrogation stop. This is why practically no usable information has ever been recovered this way, and actual information is gained through social engineering and rapport building. Next is Canotrovan. A lot of African nations have a pretty strong fear of doctors. Now, this isn't because of superstition or some fear of the modern. It is in fact very, very, very justified. In 1996, just as an example, Pfizer went to Nigeria during a meningitis outbreak and falsified a letter of approval for human trials. They gave 100 youths a very weak dose of the leading meningitis treatment, and another 100 youths their own antibiotic, Trovan, trying to skew the numbers in their favor. 11 11 youths would perish in the study, and many others suffered long-lasting health effects. Pfizer knew that the antibiotic was known to cause rather severe side effects, especially in juveniles, but leapt into human experimentation as soon as possible. They took advantage of the fear of a disadvantaged population during an outbreak that took 12,000 lives, and told them either you participate in our study, which we won't fully disclose all the risks for, or you get no treatment at all. Next is the Beecher paper. In 1966, Henry Beecher, an accomplished doctor and researcher in his own right, published an analysis of 22 papers. These papers had all been widely published in widely read and respected medical journals. They were also all on incredibly unethical studies. In one study published, the subject was told they were going to be injected with some cells, while not being told these were cancer cells that they were being subjected to. The publishing of this analysis finally brought to the public's attention, for the first time really, the massive and rampant issue of unethical human experimentation. Experiments that were being published by respected researchers in world-renowned journals. The Beecher paper would lead to the establishment of the first ethics boards and committees, which seems like an obvious no-brainer now, but simply didn't exist in the 1960s. And finally, our frostbite tests. Have you ever wondered why we know so much about frostbite and how to treat it? Well, you have the horrific Unit 731 and Hisato Yoshimura to thank. Actually, please don't thank them. They do not deserve your respect. They took hundreds of people and experimented by freezing different parts solid and then trying out different techniques to thaw and heal them. Heal is a bit of a stretch, as the vast majority of test subjects simply had utterly inhumane and horrific things done to them. Hisato Yoshimura was despised even by other members of Unit 731. These are people who are testing fire throwers and diseases on live subjects, and Hisato was so brutal even they called him a cold-blooded animal. For the rest of his life, Hisato would show zero remorse for the hundreds of lives he took, and was granted clemency by the United States in exchange for his research. Those were terrifying human experiments the government tried to hide from you. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you next time.
Now, the proper name of it, the Vincanti mouse, was a laboratory mouse from 1996 who had what looked like a human ear grown on their back. Now, the ear was actually an ear-shaped cartilage structure grown by seeding cow cartilage cells into biodegradable ear-shaped molds and then implanted under the skin of the mouse with an external ear-shaped splint to maintain the desired shape. Then the cartilage naturally grew by itself within the restricted shape and size. So no, the mouse could not hear out of that ear and listen better, but hey, it's pretty cool that they were able to do this. Now we have the robot monkey. Now, robot monkey literally sounds like the name of some sci-fi movie, but it's actually something that happened in real life. In May of 2008, experiments were conducted by Dr. Schwartz, a professor of neurobiology at the University of Pittsburgh, to teach a monkey to feed itself by using its thoughts in order to control a 4-degree of freedom robotic arm with shoulder joints, elbow, and a simple gripper. Now, they gave the monkey 2 brain implants, one each in the hand and arm areas of its motor cortex. These monitored the firing of motor neurons and sent information to a computer, which translated the patterns into commands for the robotic arm. As a result, the monkey was able to manipulate the arm, and it learned to use it to reach for food pellets, press buttons, and even twist knobs. Now, I know this sounds a little crazy, but it's actually a good thing that that was happening. By putting the brain in direct communications with machines, researchers will one day be able to engineer and operate advanced prosthetics in a natural way to help paralyzed people live a close to normal life. Now, Vladimir Demikov was a pioneer in transplantology, as he even coined the term. Now, after transplanting a number of vital organs between dogs, he wanted to take it a step further and create what we called the multi-dog. Now, Vladimir removed most of the body of a small puppy and grafted the head and forelegs to the neck of an adult dog. Now, the big dog's heart pumped enough blood for both heads, and when the multi-dog regained consciousness after the operation, the puppy's head woke up and yawned. Now, the big head gave it a puzzled look and tried first to shake it off, but remarkably though, both dogs kept their own personalities post-surgery. Though handicapped by having almost no body of its own, the puppy was as playful as any other puppy, and when the host dog got thirsty, the puppy got thirsty. When the laboratory grew hot, both host dog and puppy put out their tongues and panted to cool off. Now, unfortunately, the experiment wasn't a total success. After 6 days of life together, both heads in the common body died. Now, Ilya Leonovich was a Russian biologist born in 1870 who worked in artificial insemination. Ilya then wanted to get the sperm of animals and put them into different species to see what would happen. But in 1910, he told a gathering of zoologists that he thought it could be possible to create a human-ape hybrid. In 1926, he and Serge Vonaroff transplanted a human ovary into a chimp before attempting to inseminate her with human sperm. Now, he attempted this 2 more times without success, so then he pitched an alternative approach: to take sperm from chimpanzees and implant it into African women without their knowledge. Now, thankfully, the French governor said no to the idea, but Ilya then traveled to Abkhazia with 20 apes and was able to convince people to be a part of this experiment. 5 women or more volunteered, but no ape survived long enough at the ape nursery, and though he had women, Ilya found himself out of sperm. Now, before he could ship more apes, the Soviet Academy of Sciences heard about his plans to inseminate women in Africa, and all support for the project was taken away. Yeah, this is probably one of the most disturbing experiments I've ever heard about, and I'm glad that he was stopped because, oh my god. Yeah, I think some of these scientists needed to be stopped because some of these were absolutely crazy.
Most of us know that when you open your eyes underwater, things get blurry. That's because the water and the fluids inside our eyes are pretty similar in density, which messes with how light passes into the eye. The result? Blurry vision. But there's a group of people called the Moken who can actually see clearly underwater, even at depths of up to 22 meters or about 75 feet. The Moken live mostly on boats or stilt houses, only heading to land to trade for food and supplies. They don't use modern diving gear like masks or fishing poles. Instead, they spend a lot of time underwater, gathering resources from the ocean floor like sea cucumbers and clams. And over the course of generations, the Moken's eyes have actually developed the ability to change shape when they're underwater. They refract light better, making it easier to see things clearly underwater. Tests have shown that the underwater vision of Moken people is twice as sharp as Europeans. Sleep is a basic human need, and everyone constantly harps on 8 hours. You gotta get 8 hours of sleep or you're just crumbled to pieces throughout the course of the day. And 8 hours is probably ideal for the majority of the population, but some people really don't need 8 hours. There's a rare genetic mutation called DEC2 that allows certain people to function on just 6 hours or even less of sleep every night, and not just survive on it, it's actually ideal for them. The DEC2 mutation affects the way their bodies process sleep, making them more efficient at getting the rest they need in a shorter amount of time. It's quality over quantity. For most people, getting only 6 hours of sleep a night for a prolonged time can lead to some serious health issues like high blood pressure or heart disease, but people with this mutation don't have those problems. If you think you're one of these people, though, you are probably not. This mutation is incredibly rare. It's found in less than 1% of people who even claim to have this ability. I usually only get 6 hours of sleep a night or less, and let me tell you, I don't feel great most of the time. Hyperthymesia is a rare condition where people can remember nearly every detail of their lives with perfect clarity, able to recall what they did on a random day years before. Keep in mind, I'm not talking about like your wedding or the day your child was born. If you remember those things, great, but you probably should be able to remember those things. I'm talking about really detailed things, like even what they ate for breakfast on a random day 5 years ago. It's like they have files in their brains full of footage of every single day of their life. Now, this sounds like a pretty amazing ability, but it can actually be a double-edged sword. For some, remembering every single moment of their lives, especially the more painful ones, can be a bit overwhelming. Scientists are still trying to figure out how the brain is able to store and access all this information, but this condition is so rare that there are only a few confirmed cases. Imagine not feeling any pain, no matter how serious the injury. Again, this sounds like a real-life superpower, and I suppose it kinda is in a way, but like with most superpowers, there's a downside. The condition is called congenital insensitivity to pain, or CIP, and you don't really need to think about it much to realize that this can be a pretty dangerous condition. Pain sucks, but it is there for a reason. It alerts us to things that are harmful to us, so not being able to feel pain at all, well, it makes it much harder to know when you're injured or sick. People with CIP could break a bone or get an infection without ever feeling it, so things can be left untreated and then conditions can worsen. Even something as simple as stepping on a sharp object might go unnoticed, and it can lead to infections. CIP is caused by a mutation that affects nerve cells responsible for sending pain signals to the brain. Researchers are also studying to see if they can develop new treatments for chronic pain through this condition. Most people worry about losing bone density as they get older, which can lead to conditions like osteoporosis and brittle bones, but for a small group of people, the opposite of true. Their bones just continue getting denser as they age. This mutation is found in the Afrikaner population, people of Dutch descent living in South Africa. It's linked to a mutation in a gene called SOST, which controls bone growth. Normally, this gene keeps bone growth in check, but in those with the mutation, their bones keep getting stronger throughout their lives instead of weaker. If someone inherits 2 copies of the mutated gene, though, it causes a rare condition called sclerosis, which leads to excessive bone growth. This can result in gigantism, facial distortions, hearing loss, but if a person, again, only inherits 1 copy of the mutated gene, they have unusually dense and strong bones. Again, this mutation is extremely rare, but researchers are studying it because it could, of course, help in developing treatments for bone-related conditions. Fungal infections are another area where mutations could cause huge problems. Candida auris, for example, is a pretty nasty fungus that people tend to get in hospitals when they already have weakened immune systems. What's really creepy about this one is that it's mutated to become resistant to most antifungal treatments, so it's almost impossible to get rid of. It can cause severe infections, especially in people, again, with weakened immune systems, and because it's so resistant to treatment, it's a nightmare for doctors trying to treat it. But the problems don't stop there. Fungi like Candida auris get better at surviving in hospital environments where they're more likely to come in contact with vulnerable patients. And because they're so hard to treat, they can spread quickly between patients, making outbreaks much harder to contain. The fear is that if these fungi keep mutating, they'll become even harder to fight, potentially leading to even deadlier infections that can spread across entire hospitals or communities. As our oceans continue getting warmer, scientists are seeing an increase in the amount and size of toxic algae blooms. Now, toxic algae blooms, or harmful algae blooms, happen when certain types of algae grow out of control, producing toxins that can cause all sorts of problems. These toxins can contaminate drinking water, poison marine life, and even cause neurological diseases in humans. Some of these algae produce a toxin called domoic acid, which can poison shellfish, which in turn causes brain damage in humans who go on to eat the contaminated seafood. And the issue is only expected to get worse as the planet keeps getting warmer. The ocean becomes the perfect condition for algae to thrive. And as these algae blooms become more common and more toxic, they're posing a bigger and bigger threat to ecosystems underwater and our human health. In the same vein, pollution and radiation is causing issues with fish, who are starting to show signs of some pretty bizarre mutations. Some fish have been found with extra fins, extra eyes, or other strange mutations that you just rarely see in nature. Only now it's becoming more common. Mutations like this can be caused by chemicals and radiation leaking into the environment from industrial buildings like power plants and factories. What's worrying scientists is that these mutations could potentially spread to other species and mess up entire ecosystems. If these mutated fish were to pass on their altered genes to their offspring, it could result in entire populations of animals with extra eyes or tentacles and tumors. It'd just be a mess. And as nasty as that would be, it could have ripple effects in the food chain, affecting everything from the fish that humans eat to the animals that depend on these fish for food. We're already seeing signs of these mutations in fish populations near areas with heavy amounts of pollution, and there's real concern that as these changes spread, we might see bigger shifts in marine life that could be difficult, if not impossible, to undo. Environmental radiation is another huge concern when it comes to mutations. This can come from nuclear accidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima, radioactive waste, or even just natural sources of radiation in the environment. When plants, animals, or even humans are exposed to this radiation, it can cause pretty gnarly genetic mutations, and these mutations can get passed down through generations. There are cases of what's called a true noble heart, for example, a heart condition in infants whose mothers were exposed to radiation in Chernobyl, and these mutations can spread throughout ecosystems, affecting populations of animals and plants. Over time, the genetic changes could accumulate, leading to new diseases and deformities. Again, the Chernobyl disaster created this huge area of radioactive contamination, and scientists have found a whole bunch of mutations in animals and plants living there. Some of these mutations are mostly harmless, but others could lead to long-term health problems or even extinction for certain species. Radiation mutations aren't always spotted immediately either. It can take a while for them to manifest, but they can be incredibly dangerous in the long term. And another concerning mutation that's getting more attention is the rise of chemical-induced mutations in plants, especially crops. Pesticides and herbicides, which have been used to protect plants from pests and weeds, are causing some pretty weird and unexpected genetic changes in the plants themselves. Over time, these chemicals can create mutations that make the plants more resistant to the chemicals, leading to what are called superweeds that are harder to control. And once again, some of these mutations might be passed on to future generations of plants, creating entire populations that are resistant to herbicides and pesticides. What if we were to run out of ways to protect crops? We'd have no vegetables, which of course means no popcorn at movie theaters, meaning I'd probably never bother going to the movies again, and that is a terrifying note to end on. This is probably going to be the most obvious and immediate change. The next stage of human evolution might be us mixing with machines. We're already starting to, and it's only going to get weirder. We've got people with chips in their bodies that can open doors and start cars or scan to pay for things. I had an ex with this chip in her hand that if you scanned it with your phone, her LinkedIn would come up. I think that was something she already kind of regretted not long after, but it was very odd. Scientists are now working on brain implants that can let you control devices just by thinking about them. Eventually, some people might walk around with enhanced senses or extra robotic limbs that act like part of their body. Also, consider our memory, focus, or our processing of information. It might get more advanced. Some researchers think we could eventually boost our brains to process data at insane speeds, kind of like turning yourself into a human supercomputer. And once some people start enhancing themselves, it could change what it even means to be human. A person with a fully integrated neural implant might experience the world differently than anyone else. And way down the road, that line between people and machines might disappear completely. Walking down the street, you might not even be able to tell who's human and who isn't. This next one's actually kind of cool, but also sort of eerie. Human mutations and adaptations due to climate change. Humans have always adapted to their environment, but climate change might push evolution faster than ever, if it doesn't kill us, of course. Rising temperatures, rising sea levels, extreme weather, these aren't just problems we survive. They could actually change our bodies over time. Some scientists think future humans might develop better tolerance to heat, for example, sweating differently to handle higher temperatures. We could see lungs evolving to filter out more pollutants, or skin changing to deal with stronger UV radiation. We also got to look at resources, or rather a lack of resources. As some areas get more barren, humans might evolve to survive on less water or eat things we can't digest right now. People stuck in especially extreme environments for generations could slowly start looking or functioning differently. And unlike natural evolution in the past, the pressure is coming from us, our pollution, our cities. The environment we're creating could force the next stage of human evolution, whether we wanted to or not. We've covered some changes that could happen here on Earth, but what if we were to head out into space? There's been a lot of talk over the last couple years of humans colonizing Mars. Over a long period of time, humans in colonies in space could change. Now, I know what you're thinking, right? Well, we'd be living in protective domes that simulate our environment. But even still, after generations, there would be changes. The artificial environment might favor certain traits, like people who handle confined spaces better or tolerate low gravity exercise. Over time, those little differences could start stacking up. There's also radiation. Mars doesn't have Earth's magnetic field, so cosmic rays and solar radiation get through no matter how much protection you think you have. Over time, that could start affecting our DNA. Human evolution might be happening faster than ever now, though, and not in a biological way, but due to how technology has changed us socially. Forget survival of the fittest in the wild. Now our brains and bodies are shaped more by phones, computers, social media, the medicine that we take. We don't memorize facts as much as we used to, and a lot of us are now spending more time in virtual spaces than real ones. Even now, there are noticeable changes in how our brains work. One example, ADD. It's an all-time high. You can barely focus on one thing at a time. So just imagine future generations. They could be wired totally differently. Think about kids growing up online, never knowing life without constant notifications and doom scrolling. They might think and feel in ways that seem normal to them, but completely alien to us. Skills our ancestors relied on, like remembering details, reading maps, judging danger, that could disappear, and this is going to lead us into our next point. Smaller brains. Yes, you'd think it would be the opposite in the future, but some scientists think human brains may actually start shrinking over time due to our reliance on computers for almost everything. So the parts of our brains used for memory, navigation, or problem solving might slowly get smaller. That doesn't mean people will get dumb necessarily, it just means our brains could work differently. Evolution doesn't always favor bigger brains. The next stage might make us smarter in some ways, but physically less equipped to survive on our own outside the systems that we've built. And some futurists think we might eventually stop needing bodies at all. The idea is that people could take their minds, memories, and their entire personality and upload it into a computer. You'd exist digitally, able to live without food, sleep, or aging. Companies and researchers are already experimenting with this stuff. The weird part is imagining what that actually means for being human. If your consciousness is just data, what happens to identity? Are you still you if your body is gone and your mind can just be copied onto a computer? One day you might even decide to make dozens of copies of yourself, all living separate lives in a computer simulation, like a super advanced version of The Sims. Some people are naturally stronger than others, but a rare genetic mutation known as myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy takes strength to a whole new level. Myostatin is a protein that normally limits muscle growth in humans, but there are some people who are born with a mutation that reduces the effect of myostatin, which means their muscles keep growing without the usual restrictions. As a result, they develop extraordinarily strong and dense muscles, often far beyond what would be expected of a normal person. Apparently Eddie Hall has this, but some people aren't really sure. I wouldn't be surprised, he's incredibly strong. Anyway, people with this condition don't really need to hit the gym for hours a day to build muscle. They're born with the genetic ability to just grow massive, powerful muscles naturally. Hard to see any problems with this one, but there are some downsides. People with this condition may develop joint issues because of the sheer size and power of their muscles. Imagine sharing your body with someone else and having to coordinate every action you make. That is the reality for people with polycephaly, a condition where a person has two heads. Or I guess you could say two people have one body. This happens when conjoined twins don't fully separate during development, and sometimes the heads are joined at the neck or share the same body. It's incredibly rare, with only 1 in 50,000 to even 200,000 pregnancies resulting in polycephalic twins. Usually they'll have control over half of their limbs, but it can get complicated. Each twin can control their own side, but both of course need to work together to move. Some people with polycephaly can walk, run, and even drive, but it's not always straightforward. Occasionally one of the heads might not have much control over the body, or not any at all. That's known as parasitic head, and sadly attempts to remove it through surgery usually don't work. Most polycephalic people fortunately don't survive into adulthood. So most of us see the typical 7 colors in a rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. If you count more colors though, you may be someone with a rare condition called tetrachromacy. People with tetrachromacy have 4 types of color detecting cells in their eyes instead of the usual 3. This extra type of cone cell means they can see way way more shades than the average person. It can spot subtle differences in color that most of us just don't notice. One famous example of someone with tetrachromacy is Australian artist Conchetta Antico. As you can imagine, her paintings are pretty vibrant, just full of color, and I would just love to see her work through her eyes. Photographic memory, also called eidetic memory, is something most of us have heard of before, and people are pretty liberal about throwing this term around too, but it's a lot more rare than people realize. It's the ability to remember images, even entire pages of text only after a brief glance. Similar to hyperthymesia, people with photographic memory can recall every little detail as if they're looking at a mental snapshot of a moment in time. Again, some people claim to have photographic memory, but true photographic memory is incredibly rare, and experts aren't totally sure how it works. What scientists do know is that people with photographic memory seem to have special neural processes in their brains that just allow them to encode and retrieve visual information much more efficiently than others. Some brain regions responsible for memory and visual perception are more active in people with this ability, but no one fully understands the exact mechanics yet. Aging. Unfortunately, it happens to all of us. All we can do is drink water, rub our faces with lotion, sleep better, and hope for the best. But for a few lucky folks, the typical signs of aging, like wrinkles and gray hair, don't show up as quickly. And I'm sure a bunch of you are going, well, duh, obviously that's true, but I mean not nearly as quickly. This condition, known as delayed aging, means that some people simply just age way slower than the rest of us. They appear youthful even as they get older, often staying healthy and vibrant long into their later years. Their bodies also resist age-related diseases like Alzheimer's or heart disease, and they seem to have more energy and stamina than other people their age. Scientists are still figuring out how this happens, but it's believed that certain genetic mutations might make their bodies more resilient to the usual wear and tear that comes with getting older. Unlike the other conditions on this list with benefits and downsides, there's really no downside I can think of about this one other than being ID'd more at bars. I mean, anyway, who cares really? Studying delayed aging is important because it could give us a chance to slow down the aging process and live longer, healthier lives for the general population. If we can figure out how some people manage to stay so youthful and strong, scientists might be able to create treatments that could help everyone stay in better shape as they get older, without all the usual aches, pains, and health problems.